I babysat my grandkids who were 5 years old and 4 years old. And kids that age typically get sick with all these little things going on. Okay, so I never get sick myself. I can be in a room where everybody can get a cold, and I'll just maybe get a sniffle and asymptomatic. I got COVID, asymptomatic, never get sick. So I babysit one day, and about a few days, a week later, I'm feeling sick, which I can't understand. But it's a little lung thing going on. Then, I had work to do around the place. I had to split wood for the winter for firewood. So I go down and I'm going to spend the day splitting wood. I start splitting wood and I'm working, I'm getting up a sweat and all this. And then soon I start to feel a little heavy in my chest and light in my head. I continued working because I knew I wasn't sick, nothing was really going on, but I continued working and got to a point to where I could not continue working anymore. I actually had a problem every time I stood up. I got vertigo and I was really laboring in my breathing, so I couldn't breathe. So I did what I never did in the past. That is just left everything right there and just turned around and walked up the hill to the house. So I get up to the house, I get into the yard, I close the gate behind me, and then all of a sudden, boom, I was hit by a Mack truck. That's what it felt like. I couldn't breathe. It knocked me onto my knees. And after a while of having, spinning in my yard on my knees, I couldn't breathe, so I fell into a prone position, and then I started getting a little fear, is what started coming out. So I figured I'll call 911. I live in a rural area, so it takes quite some time for the 911 to get to me. Oh, there you are. I see you. Hi. And while I'm waiting, the 911 operator was on the phone, so I was able to communicate with her. Please contact your daughter, and she'll come and lock the house up, make sure everything's straight, watch the animals because we have horses, chickens, and dogs, and she'll take care of everything. Good. 911 responders get to me, and they wanted to intubate me, which was put me on a breathing machine, but I said, no, we're not going to do that. I'm a do not resuscitate in any case. So my body will be able to handle it. And somewhere between picking me up in my yard and getting me to the emergency room, um, I also had a heart attack. We found all this out after the fact. I also found out after the fact that, yeah, I was sick. I had RSV, I had pneumonia, and I had the flu. So my little asymptomatic, never get sick was no longer the case. When I was in the emergency room, then part of the process, part of what was going on was I start to feel, you know, I start losing consciousness. And the way I was losing consciousness, I started to feel a moving wave. It started at my feet and worked its way up, and it was a wave of relaxation. And next thing you know, I no longer have any sense of anything physical anymore, and I'm leaving my body. Now, how I could say I'm leaving my body, I've been involved with metaphysical spirituality for all of my life. Um, I've been a pastor in a spiritualist church. I was an influential part of a regional spiritual center. I've written books on it. I've wrote about it in small stories. I've taught classes, and I've taken many classes as far as meditation, leaving your body, astral projection, etc. So I knew I was leaving my body, but I didn't do anything to to prepare myself for leaving my body. I thought it was kind of odd. So what I'll explain next, I'll explain it to you in sequential steps. But I must say, this wasn't in sequential steps, one, two, three, four. This was all four pieces happening at the same time, in parallel with one another. So the first step, I'm in a cloud. It's a nice white cloud, and I can see light filtering through. And the cloud seems to have a consciousness. And that consciousness commands me in a very compassionate way to be at peace. All right, I'm at peace. While I'm there, again, I feel my consciousness, but it is associated with nothing of this earth. Nothing, no part of my body is in any consideration again. So I feel I'm in my consciousness, and what I then get is a series of memories and emotions. The memories were associated with an emotion. For example, I had the same emotion that I would have with my grandmother as was a child, and I'd sit on her lap and she'd wash my face or something. I'd have that calm, serene, secure feel, and I associated it with her. Uh, I would have memories and emotions of lightheartedness from when I go hanging out with my friends and we're all goofing around. I had that emotion, and it spread out to, people who were associated with that emotion. I used to do a lot of sailing. I was a merchant mariner, ship's captain, and I had sailboats. I got the same feeling. I was getting that feeling that I had when I'm sitting in my sailboat, going with the wind, going at whole speed. Everything's nice. The breeze is in your hair, and then you get a feel from that. And I was getting that feeling. So I'm getting all these feelings in this consciousness of a cloud. And all right, that was nice. The next phase comes, and now it feels like I'm in a hall of some type. And now is when people proceed, or there's a procession of people, and everyone seemed to have been announced. So, John Doe. Okay, here's John Doe. Here's Sam Smith. All right. Here's my wife, my late wife. All right. So these people are coming in front of me, and we're having a moment of relating. So it was at that time that, and it turned out who these people were. These people were anyone that I contacted, anyone that I came in contact with, people that were in my life, people that I have never knew but were impacted by my passage, by my life. Uh, it's the old butterfly effect. If a butterfly flaps its wings in Texas, do they have a storm in, Bangladesh, for example? The butterfly effect. So the butterfly effect with me spread to many people who I had never met in this life, but I was being introduced to as they were being announced to me. During that relating period, it was more or less like we just hugged, and our hearts came together. Now, some of the people I remembered were people who tormented me when I was in my younger age. There wasn't a matter of us getting together and talking about what happened, we're apologies, we're sorry, here's what went through and everything. There was no analytics of the events that shaped our lives. There was simply growing together, hearts together. In other words, we were beyond that now. We were beyond any of the occurrences or the aspects of our lives, and we were now just one. This went on for some appreciable amount of time, and after that period came to an end, the next one that's when the fireworks started. In other words, fireworks of revelry, celebration, and everybody having fun. That is when Raphael, an archangel, came onto the scene. Now, he didn't have a sign saying he was Raphael, and we weren't introduced, but I knew it was Raphael. And in the manner that he came, I could say that he was riding on a chariot of fire because it was spectacular when he appeared, when he showed up, when it was his time. Raphael and many other spirit guides and angels were flitting around all over the place, spiritual entities and such. And then they took me and moved me into a spot where I more or less merged with myself. So there was an aspect of me sitting there in the world on the other side of the veil, and I was doing my job. And what my job was, what does Raphael do? Raphael is a part of the angelic choir, and he's responsible for running the universe, you could say. My job was being in the spinal cord, with Raphael being the mind. If we looked at the universe as a body, Raphael was the brain. I was a part of the spinal cord, taking the electrical impulses and moving them out to the different points to move your fingers, to breathe, to do other such stuff. So I went and returned to my job that I never left, um, which was working the universe. That was lasting for a while to where I felt quite at home. And next, it went into a phase of preparation. Now, I used to be a project manager, so I would sit at the desk for hours at a time, and I would be involved in minute plans for a project. You know, 18 tasks, who's supposed to do the task, what the task is, how long it should take, how much it would cost. You get a feel for planning when you're sitting there doing that and you're immersed in it. I felt I was immersed in planning. And what I was planning was looking at the world, seeing bright lights going off the world, and I was going to go back into that environment, and I was planning my entry. Now, right at some point during that time, um, I feel pulled away from all of that, just like a vacuum cleaner, just pulling up dust off the floor, just totally ripped from it. And what I remember seeing is in front of my face was the face of my Uncle Ralph. Now, my Uncle Ralph died a few years ago, and I remember specifically thinking, Uncle Ralph, this can't be you. You're dead. So Uncle Ralph says to me, don't be a chooch, which is the word we use for an idiot. Don't be an idiot. Tell your story. And the next thing I know, Uncle Ralph's face changed into someone who was a little bit more plumper, someone who had eyeglasses, and who was yelling at me, something to the effect of, don't worry about it, Mrs. Cesaro, we got you, we got you. You know, so that was when I came back. So what exactly happened that brought me back was my daughter came into the emergency room. She did not go to the house as I had asked her to through the 911 operator. She went to the hospital instead. She walked into the hospital room or the emergency room, and I was coding. She instructed everyone to resuscitate me. And they said, but he said, do not resuscitate. And she said, I'm the personal representative. I'm his POA. Do as I command, resuscitate him. She figured, okay, well, give me one more chance. They resuscitated me, and that's when I saw Uncle Ralph. It took me now from that point. They put me on an intubator tube. I was breathing on my own, but they wanted to help me a little bit more so that my lungs would heal. They also shot me full of steroids, so I was in the ICU for another 3 or 4 days. And then I was transferred to a private room for a few days, and then home, where it took me about a month to recover. During the month, I spent a lot of time at home doing nothing, and I started to come up with what went on because I knew I remembered it all, but it took a while for the facts to come back to me. Now, when this is, I've done this talk now a few times, and each time it feels like therapy to me because each time I relate the tale, I come up with new impressions and new ideas of what I may have missed and came up. And it's quite, when this happened, I spoke with no one about it. I talked to nobody. I compiled a book over a 20-year period. I did like my uncle said, I put the story together and I did self-publishing. And that's when it came in the book and people started reading the book and they found out about the NDE and then they started contacting me. So now I'm doing podcasts. But before that, I spoke with no one. So what had happened was something that seemed very familiar to me. I felt like I was back at home. There was no barrier between me and anyone. Everything was, we were all brothers and sisters. We all shared one single heart. There was no discussion about wrongs or rights or things that have been happened. Nobody cared about that anymore. It was like we were all there together doing the same thing, being the same place, doing our work and living, being, you name it, there we were. The work I was doing had to do with running of the universe in some manner or form, I imagine, because that's what they do in that sector. And it wasn't as if, okay, here I am, I'm going to go and get this job and you work into it. No, it was like I was already there. There was an aspect of me already in heaven or wherever I was, and I just came in and merged. So so that would say that my consciousness, while I was in the other world, a little fragment came off, and I had a life called Wayne Cesaro. Raphael. Raphael, there is no one single Raphael. Raphael is a piece of energy that's just floating all the place. And if you want to say that he was a part of the mind of the body known as the universe, then the mind has many, many cells in the mind, and he was a cell or a conglomerate of cells and provided a function. And I worked with him or for him to help provide the functions. And that's what I've been doing, and I just joined myself. The coming back in or the planning to coming back in, evidently I planned on coming back in and reincarnating. Now, the funny thing about it is, or the odd thing about it is temporal. I could have reincarnated at any time and any place on the earth. I could have reincarnated in the past. I could have gone into the future. I was personally looking at the future, say about 10,000 or several thousand years into the future when I was going to come back down. But again, could have been the past. It didn't matter because time didn't seem to have any consideration anymore. And the memories that I had, they seem similar to going out into a nice spring day with the sun in your face and laying down and relaxing and just recalling old friends and old times. And it was very peaceful and calming. I think that helped quite a bit set the stage for what was coming next. My favorite experience was the aspect of performing a function and having a purpose and being a part of the working whole. I I I need purpose in life, and so I try to find purpose in many things that I do, and I keep a look at the bigger picture. So when I got into that point, I just felt I was home. It was just great. I was home. Everything and every other thing that I touched upon was all we're working our purpose. We are shared love, and we're being useful. I have a book. I just happen to have it here. It's called Spirit Guides and Angels, Death and Taxes. So we all have spirit guides and angels living with us and involved with our lives. And the death and taxes, what can we be sure of in life? We're going to pay taxes and eventually we're going to die. So this has to do with a life lived uh, living with spirit guides and angels in the workaday world and how that works. Aside from the book, you can find the book on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and just about every other retail outlet on the internet. My website is cesarotheauthor.com. That's Cesaro, the author.com. There you can see a blog. You can see copies of different podcasts that I've been on, some information about me. I'm also a certified and insured personal trainer, and I'm working on being a certified health and fitness coach. So I also have some of that going on the website. So, and my team tells me that we're going to turn the website into a transactional site soon. So you'll be able to get everything with Wayne Cesaro in one local area. Uh, Facebook and YouTube, I am at author Wayne Cesaro. You can find my page there and join my page. And right now I'm working on orbs. I have a bunch of photos of orbs, so I'm building an album and looking at each orb that we can find. And those are good ways to get in touch with me. But the book's on Amazon. It's Spirit Guides and Angels, Death and Taxes. And that's a whole chapter filled with this topic. I don't know of how we can have heaven on earth, but I know that one way that we can do it is to love one another, to accept one another. And, if I have to die to go to heaven to feel complete acceptance and peace, well, that's a long way to go for something that we can have here. So it's like, hey, let's take a shortcut. Let's just love everybody, accept them for who they are, and help them. And then maybe we can make heaven on earth here.